They say home is where you should feel safest. But for me, that night, home turned into the most dangerous place I could be. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings still clung to my uniform as I pulled into my driveway. 12 long hours at the shop had left me exhausted, and all I wanted was to lay eyes on my pride and joy, my 1967 Camaro SS, a project I'd spent 18 months resurrecting from a rusted heap into rolling perfection. I pressed the garage remote, and the door groaned open, unveiling chrome that could blind you and paint so deep it seemed bottomless. That's when everything went wrong. A voice pierced the evening air. "Thief! Someone call 911!" My HOA president neighbor, Brenda, came storming across the lawn like a rabid pit bull, phone already at her ear. "Yes, there's a black man stealing a car right now! Send everyone!" Sirens screamed in the distance before she even faced me. I stood in my own driveway, holding my own keys, staring at my own car, about to be arrested for theft. What would you do if your neighbor weaponized the police against you at your own home? Drop a flag emoji. Tell me where you're watching from. My name's Marcus, third-generation mechanic. My grandfather taught my father taught me, and for 60 years our family has kept this town's cars alive. After my divorce finalized last spring, my ex deciding grease-stained hands weren't sexy, I scraped together enough to buy a modest house in Willowbrook Estates, a middle-class HOA community where the lawns look cloned, the mailboxes line up like soldiers, and everyone supposedly minds their own business. Or so I was promised. The Camaro wasn't some midlife crisis toy. I tracked her down I first spotted her at an estate sale 18 months ago. A rusted-out corpse most people would have traded to the scrapyard for $30. But beneath all that decay, I recognized pure American muscle waiting to roar again. For $3,200, she was mine. Every weekend for the next year and a half became my private resurrection ritual. A rebuilt 350 small block, a freshly tuned turbo 400 transmission, and a complete suspension overhaul. The paint job alone demanded 4 painstaking months of sanding, priming, and wet sanding until the hugger orange finish gleamed bright enough to blind low-flying planes. I photographed every bolt, every gasket, every bead of sweat, for insurance of course, and kept every receipt tucked into a 3-ring binder so thick it could double as a weapon. Fresh primer and metal shavings became my Saturday morning cologne, while cold coffee sat forgotten on the workbench as I disappeared into the meditation of mechanical perfection. Then there was Brenda Wilson, the walking, talking fever dream of an HOA rulebook. She'd moved into Willowbrook 5 years earlier and immediately crowned herself queen of everything. Brenda was a real estate agent with a white BMW that saw the detail shop more often than most people see a shower. Her manicured nails had never known real work, her highlighted hair seemed to defy gravity, and her smile could freeze antifreeze. She'd reigned as HOA president for 3 straight years, unopposed, mostly because nobody else wanted to volunteer for neighborhood Gestapo duty. Paperwork was her weapon of choice. Trash cans left out 12 minutes past pickup? Violation. Fence posts measuring 2 1/8 inches instead of the regulation 2 inches? Violation. Mailbox fonts not officially Willowbrook approved? Violation. She once even cited me for grass supposedly growing beyond the maximum 2.5 inches, showing up with a literal ruler to prove it. "Just maintaining community standards," she'd said with that artificial grin. 2 weeks before the garage door incident, she'd stormed over while I was bleeding brake lines, apparently offended by the screech of my impact wrench. "Excuse me, but there's a noise ordinance. No power tools after 6 p.m. I wiped my hands on a rag, kept my voice calm. "Actually, city ordinance allows hobby work until 9 p.m. I can show you the documentation." Her smile went glacial. "Well, we'll see about that. This kind of industrial activity affects property values." The way she said it made property values sound like a holy commandment. Brenda spoke the words industrial activity like I was running a meth lab instead of restoring a piece of American history. The day it all blew up began with her monthly poolside spectacle. By Saturday morning, her backyard was buzzing with neighborhood wives clutching mimosas and pretending to care about each other's vacation slideshows. Fake laughter floated through my garage walls until her voice sliced the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, that's my new Camaro. Just bought it from a classic dealer in Phoenix. $45,000, but worth every penny. They're shipping it next week." My socket wrench slipped and clattered to the concrete. She was scrolling through photos on her phone, pictures of a Camaro identical to mine, soaking up the gasps and admiration like she'd personally invented the combustion engine. Later that afternoon, running low on brake fluid, I fired up my baby. The 350 growled to life, its rumble rolling across the neighborhood like mechanical thunder, deep, primal, perfect. When I returned, Brenda was planted in her driveway, arms crossed, face flushed, glaring at my Camaro with the unblinking focus of a hawk tracking prey. I gave her a polite nod. She didn't respond, just stared, eyes burning holes through the paint. That night, I imagine she spent hours online, constructing her delusion brick by digital brick, convincing herself I'd stolen her imaginary purchase. By morning, she'd morphed from irritating neighbor to something far more dangerous, a Karen with a mission. So when 2 squad cars came screaming into my driveway, lights blazing, I knew my quiet Saturday was toast. 4 officers piled out like they were storming a bank robbery. Exactly the scene Brenda had painted in her Oscar-worthy 911 call. Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with calm eyes and the steady patience of someone who'd seen every shade of crazy, approached with his hand resting on his belt. His partner, Morgan, a younger guy built like he bench-pressed squad cars for cardio, flanked him, notebook ready. "Evening, sir. We received a report of a stolen vehicle at this address." The absurdity hit me square in the skull. "Stolen vehicle, officer? This is my car, in my garage, at my house. That's like accusing me of stealing my own refrigerator." Brenda materialized beside the officers like some suburban poltergeist, knuckles white around her phone. "That's him! That's the car thief! I bought that exact Camaro yesterday for $45,000. I inhaled slowly, catching the lingering scent of exhaust from my perfectly legal muscle car, and tried not to laugh at the cruel comedy my life had turned into. "Stay calm," I reminded myself. My old man always said, "Documentation beats desperation every time." So I looked at the officers and said, "I can prove ownership right now." Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through the album I'd obsessively built. 18 months of progress shots, from rusted shell to rolling chassis to painted glory. Rodriguez studied the images with genuine interest. His brows rose as he swiped through photos of me lowering in the engine block, priming the body panels, stitching the seats. "That's some serious craftsmanship," he murmured, zooming in on the engine bay. "You do this professionally?" "Family business," I told him. "My grandfather would have smacked me with a wrench if I ever cut corners." Meanwhile, Brenda was unraveling. "He's lying," she screeched, shoving a handful of printed photos at the officers. Images she'd clearly yanked off some dealership's website minutes before dialing 911. "I wired the money yesterday. They're shipping it this week." Chen flipped through her evidence with all the enthusiasm of someone auditing tax returns. Stock photos, no VINs, no paperwork, just glossy images that could have come from any orange Camaro between 1967 and yesterday. "Ma'am," he asked flatly, "do you have a purchase contract, a bill of sale, wire confirmation, transfer receipts, dealer contact info?" Chen pressed. Brenda's face turned the shade of a fire engine. It's all being processed. The dealer said paperwork takes extra time for classic cars." While she stumbled through excuses, I dug into my workbench like some kind of automotive archaeologist. Out came the 3-ring binder, organized by date, a complete genealogy of my Camaro's rebirth.
"Here's my DMV registration," I said, holding out the holy grail of car ownership. 18 months old, my name, my address, the matching VIN. Rodriguez's flashlight beam danced across the document, every number, date, and signature lining up like soldiers. I flipped to the next sleeve. Insurance policy, too. Progressive required restoration photos for agreed value coverage. Chen jotted notes, occasionally glancing at Brenda's increasingly desperate improvisations. The woman was unraveling faster than a bargain bin sweater, and I almost felt bad for her. "Officers, he obviously forged everything," Brenda snapped. "He's probably running some sophisticated identity theft operation." That was my cue to unleash the nuclear option. From the back of the binder, I pulled a yellowed sheet of legal paper, edges soft from handling, ink faded but still browed. Written in the shaky cursive of a 93-year-old widow, 1967 Chevrolet Camaro. Condition as is. Extensive rust damage. $3,200 cash. Buyer assumes all responsibility. Below it, a signature that belonged in a museum. Eleanor Hutchinson, estate sale. Her phone number, date, 18 months ago. Rodriguez studied it carefully, like he was holding history in his hands. Rodriguez held up the handwritten bill of sale like he'd unearthed buried treasure. This is the original purchase document. Eleanor Hutchinson had been selling
off her late husband's project cars. Sweetest woman you could ever meet, made me promise I'd bring the Camaro back to show her once it was restored. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear a sprinkler hissing 3 houses down. Chen shut his notebook with the finality of a gavel. "Ma'am, this gentleman has a clear chain of ownership spanning more than a year. Your evidence appears to be internet printouts." Rodriguez's tone shifted to that calm, deliberate register cops use when someone's public meltdown crosses into criminal territory. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that filing a false police report is a misdemeanor in this state. My father was a prosecutor for 30 years. I've seen people do real jail time for knowingly lying to law enforcement." The blood drained from Brenda's face as if someone had opened a valve. There must be some terrible mistake. The stress of car shopping, you know how confusing these things can be. But her eyes betrayed her, cold, calculating, already plotting the next move. When the officers pulled away, I caught her through her living room window, staring at me with the precision of a chess master. This wasn't over. That was just round 1. Monday morning hit me with all the subtlety of a diesel backfire. I stumbled to the mailbox in yesterday's clothes, clutching coffee, when I spotted it. The official HOA violation notice, coiled inside like a venomous snake. Notice of covenant violation, unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. According to Brenda's kingdom, my work van, a plain Ford Transit with Rodriguez Family Auto painted on the side, was a threat to community standards. $200 fine. The violation notice gave me 48 hours to comply, Brenda's signature curling across the bottom like she'd just signed my execution order. From my kitchen window, I watched her power walk past my driveway, glaring at my van like it was desecrating her grandmother's grave. Somehow her morning jog route had expanded to include 17 laps past my house, I counted. Here's what most homeowners don't realize about HOA covenants. They're legally binding contracts, not just suggestions scribbled by suburban monarchs in the middle of a crisis. My divorce lawyer drilled that lesson into me. Everything leaves a paper trail, and paper trails don't lie. So during lunch, I headed to the county courthouse and dug through public records like an automotive archaeologist. What I found was better than stumbling on a forgotten lottery ticket in my jeans pocket. I'd bought my work van in 2017, 3 years before Willowbrook introduced their commercial vehicle ban in 2020. By law, anything owned prior to new restrictions is grandfathered in. Translation, Brenda had no legal ground to stand on. That night, I drafted a rebuttal that would have made my old man proud, stapled copies of my purchase records to it, and hand-delivered the packet to the HOA management office.
The receptionist's eyes widened as she skimmed my response, like she was watching a slow-motion car wreck. "Oh dear," she whispered, "Mrs. Wilson isn't going to appreciate this development." On that point, she was absolutely right. By Wednesday, my mailbox had turned into By midweek, my mailbox had turned into Brenda's personal complaint distribution center. 3 more violation notices appeared like bad magic. First, oil stains on the driveway, even though I pressure wash that concrete monthly with monk-like dedication. Second, excessive automotive odors from the garage. Apparently, the honest smell of WD-40 and elbow grease was too much for her suburban nose. Third, another noise violation, conveniently during hours well within city code. Brenda was carpet bombing me with paperwork, hoping one of her complaints would finally land. That's when I made the smartest investment of the entire war: surveillance. I went full Big Brother on my property, 4 high-definition security cameras with night vision sharp enough to catch a mosquito landing on my mailbox, all streaming to cloud storage. It didn't take long to capture Brenda's new obsession: property line patrols. Every morning she marched along our shared fence with her iPhone, snapping photos and wielding a collapsible yardstick that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. She had turned neighbor watching into an Olympic sport. Then came Thursday evening and Brenda's nuclear option: an emergency HOA board meeting to address ongoing violations. The notice landed in my mailbox at 4 p.m. for a 7 p.m. meeting. Technically legal, but time to cripple any real defense. I walked into the community center expecting a kangaroo court. What I found was worse. 3 middle-aged women gathered around the emergency board meeting looked less like a tribunal and more like a church fundraiser. Brenda sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by her jittery Lieutenant Clara, who seemed to apologize for existing, and Janet, whose main contribution was nodding so hard I thought her neck
might snap. "Where's the rest of the board?" I asked, sliding into a chair opposite this suburban inquisition. Brenda's smile could have preserved meat through winter. "This is quite sufficient for tonight's business. Effective immediately, we're issuing a ban on all automotive repair activities. Past violations carry a $500 fine." I pulled out my phone, the HOA bylaws already queued up, because knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is a tactical nuke. "Interesting theory," I said, scrolling, "but Section 4.3 requires 7 days' notice for voting matters, and Section 4.7 mandates a quorum of 5 board members. I count 3, so legally this has about as much authority as a neighborhood book club." Clara flushed the shade of overcooked shrimp. "Well, this is just preliminary discussion." I didn't miss a beat. "And Section 2.9 states that invalid meetings create personal liability for individual board members." 3 hours of legal research and a pot of jet fuel coffee had armed me well. Brenda's composure shattered like safety glass. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Coming into our neighborhood with your people and your activities." The venom in her tone could have stripped paint. But my old man drilled one rule into me: bullies dig their own graves if you let them. Stay calm, stick to facts, hand them the rope. "I think I'm just a homeowner who reads contracts before signing them," I replied. "Novel concept, I know." Later that night, neighbor Tom appeared in my driveway, shifting awkwardly. "Most of us think she's completely lost it," he admitted. "Want to grab coffee tomorrow? I think it's time we talked." Friday morning kicked off with a doorbell symphony at 7:15 a.m. Standing on my porch was Dave Martinez from City Code Enforcement, clipboard in hand and wearing the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd refereed one too many neighbor feuds. "Sorry to bother you so early, Mr. Rodriguez. We got an anonymous complaint about unlicensed commercial auto repair. Mind if I take a look?" I led him into my garage, my weekend sanctuary glowing in the morning light. The air smelled of polished metal and clean motor oil, like high-end cologne for gearheads.
Every wrench, socket, and screwdriver had its own spot on the pegboard, the setup neat enough to make a Swiss watchmaker jealous. Dave's shoulders relaxed almost instantly. Jesus, this is cleaner than the shop where I get my truck serviced. He dragged a finger across my workbench. Spotless. So, what do you do for work? He asked. Family mechanic business, I explained. This is just my hobby. Weekends only. No customers. He nodded, jotting notes while eyeing my engine hoist. Anonymous tip claimed you're running an illegal business. I see no evidence of commercial activity, no customer cars, no money changing hands. You're absolutely golden. As he climbed back into his city truck, one foot on the running board, he paused. Off the record, this is my 4th visit to this neighborhood in a month. Same voice every time, just a new complaint. That lady needs a hobby that doesn't involve my department. But Brenda wasn't done. Her next masterstroke came via certified mail, a formal complaint to my homeowner's insurance company. She'd contacted Progressive directly, insisting my garage projects created a fire hazard that endangered the entire block. The letter demanded an immediate inspection or policy cancellation. When my insurance agent, Bill, showed up Tuesday afternoon, I braced for bureaucratic hell when my insurance agent, Bill, showed up. Instead, I found a kindred spirit who spent the first 10 minutes drooling over my Camaro's engine bay like it was the Sistine Chapel. "Someone's definitely trying to screw with you," he said, scrawling his signature across the inspection report with a flourish. "Your fire safety setup exceeds commercial standards. Half these neighborhood garages are death traps, propane tanks stacked next to extension cord Christmas trees. You're fine." Progressive's official response was even better, a cease and desist letter sent straight to Brenda, which politely but firmly translated to, "Stop filing fraudulent claims or we'll prosecute you, Karen." But our pint-sized neighborhood Napoleon wasn't out of ammunition. She'd discovered the nuclear option of modern warfare, social media. Overnight, the Willowbrook Neighborhood Watch Facebook group appeared like digital cancer. Brenda's opening post showcased photos of my van and garage, accompanied by captions that could have doubled as a dog whistle manufacturer's catalog. "Just concerned about maintaining our beautiful community standards," she typed, with enough artificial sugar to cause diabetes. "Some recent activities might be more appropriate for industrial zones, don't you think?" Tom slid his phone across the table at our next coffee, his face redder than a fire truck. 23 members in the first hour. It's like watching a dumpster fire you can't look away from.
The comments section quickly turned into a gladiatorial pit. A handful of neighbors jumped in swinging on my behalf, sharing their own Brenda horror stories. Others stayed quiet, weighing the social cost of crossing the HOA's self-appointed dictator. Brenda's digital empire collapsed under the weight of her own ego when she started deleting comments that didn't worship her narrative. Nothing stokes suburban outrage quite like obvious censorship. Within days, the group had splintered into warring factions, bickering over everything from free speech to property. Sunday morning, escalation arrived scattered across my driveway like metallic confetti. 24 roofing nails placed with surgical precision, waiting to shred unwary tires. My security cameras caught the 2 a.m. culprit, a figure in a dark hoodie moving with the jittery energy of someone committing their first felony. The footage was grainy, but that trademark power walk looked familiar. Brenda always moved like she was perpetually late for an argument. Officer Morgan took my report with the gravity it deserved. "Classic intimidation pattern," he said, snapping photos of the evidence. "Document everything. These cases simmer for months, then pop off into arrests real quick." Later, while scrubbing through camera footage, I noticed something that made my coffee turn to ice. Brenda's morning jogs had evolved into reconnaissance missions, pacing the property line, snapping photos, measuring angles, recording distances. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was military-grade surveillance for something bigger.
By Wednesday, the nuclear option landed in my mailbox, an anonymous letter on cheap printer paper. Your kind doesn't belong here. Leave voluntarily or face escalating consequences. No signature, no return address. But the paper stock was a dead ringer for Brenda's HOA notices. Same watermark, same printer signature. Divorce court had taught me enough document forensics to recognize a match. Detective Martinez, now assigned to my case file, studied the letter like it was Exhibit A. Anonymous threats like this qualify for hate crime prosecution under state and federal statutes. We're building a substantial case against your neighbor. That night, Tom's quiet coffee chats swelled into a coalition of 6 neighbors. 6 households gathered around Tom's dining table, each armed with their own Brenda war stories. Mike, the lawyer, fined for using unauthorized mailbox fonts. Sarah, the accountant, cited for planting flowers without pre-approval from the architectural committee. Every tale was more absurd than the last. Time for coordinated resistance, Tom declared, stirring his coffee like it was a Molotov cocktail. Individual complaints get buried. Group action gets results. As we traded grievances and mapped out legal strategies, it hit me. Brenda had birthed her own worst nightmare. Not a victim, not a lone target, a coalition. Neighbors with documentation, credentials, and a shared fury. The hunter had officially become the hunted. By Friday, my warpath led me to the county courthouse basement, a fluorescent-lit purgatory that smelled like stale coffee and bureaucratic despair. The records clerk, who looked like she'd been embalmed sometime during the Carter administration, slid a battered box across the counter with a sigh. HOA filings, Research Room B, good luck. 3 hours later, buried in paper towers that looked like a tornado had ransacked an accounting office, I struck gold. Or, more accurately, rot. Willowbrook's financial statements were less bookkeeping and more crime novel. $15,000 to BNB Property Solutions for consulting services with no description. $8,500 to Brenda's Best Gardens for landscaping that never materialized. And the piece de resistance, $12,000 to Wilson & Associates Legal Services, a firm that, according to state bar records, did not exist. And wouldn't you know it, every shady payment coincided neatly with the timeline of Brenda's divorce proceedings. The kicker? All 3 companies listed the same business address, 1247 Maple Lane, Brenda's house. One quick search of the state registry confirmed the obvious. BNB Property Solutions, sole proprietorship of Brenda Wilson, formed 6 months after she filed for divorce. Brenda's Best Gardens dissolved last year without ever planting so much as a dandelion. And Wilson & Associates, her ex-husband's old law firm, repurposed as her private ATM. Our elected HOA president wasn't preserving community standards. She was looting the neighborhood treasury like a suburban Pablo Escobar, funneling $78,000 into her personal war chest over just 2 years. But the part that made my hands tremble wasn't the theft. It was the pattern. Cross-referencing complaint dates with property sales painted the real picture. Brenda had perfected a system, harassed targeted homeowners into submission until they sold below market value, then swoop in with her realtor's license to push the sale through her.
Investor contacts. She pocketed double commission and juicy kickbacks while the family she terrorized fled in defeat. 3 households had already fallen. The Hendersons caved after months of excessive noise citations over their son's basketball hoop, selling $40,000 under appraisal. The Patels surrendered after relentless violations over culturally inappropriate cooking odors. And now me, single homeowner, no family buffer, sitting on a $380,000 property. I wasn't just a neighbor in her sights, I was prey, a perfect mark for forced sale manipulation, except the nuclear twist was buried deep in a foreclosure stack. When I found it, I actually laughed out loud in that mausoleum of stale paper and humming fluorescence. Brenda's own house was circling the drain. $23,000 in unpaid HOA dues,
to her own association. Add in back taxes, attorney fees, and credit card debt, and the picture was clear. The Queen of Willowbrook was broke. Her foreclosure hearing was set exactly 4 weeks out. The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. The self-appointed ruler of lawn heights and mailbox fonts hadn't paid her own dues in over a year. Suddenly, every bizarre escalation snapped into place. The false reports, the paper war, the late-night surveillance. Brenda wasn't just drunk on power. She was a cornered animal, clawing for survival, and I was her last shot at a fat commission before the bank took her castle. The Camaro incident hadn't been random. It was her Hail Mary. I fed document after document into the copier, each whir cementing the case against her. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the electric charge of knowing the truth. $17 in copy fees, best investment of my life. Walking back across the courthouse lot, sunlight bouncing off my truck, I dialed Tom. "You sitting down?" I asked, the grin spreading before I could stop it. Because what I just dug up changes everything. The war was no longer defense. The counterattack had begun. And Brenda Wilson had no idea the jaws of her own trap were about to slam shut. Saturday morning turned Tom's garage into mission control for Operation Takedown Karen. The air was thick with coffee, motor oil, and the unmistakable scent of impending justice. Around a battered folding table, Tom had assembled what I can only call the Avengers of suburban warfare. Sarah Morgan, a forensic accountant who could sniff embezzlement like a bloodhound chasing bacon. Mike Patterson, semi-retired corporate lawyer whose idea of fun was dismantling people in depositions. Linda Martinez, a high school teacher whose organizational skills could make NASA jealous. And Carlos Mendez, a contractor who knew every loophole in Tri-County building codes. "Jesus Christ on a cracker," Sarah muttered, spreading Brenda's financial records across the table like a CSI examining murder evidence. "This woman's embezzlement technique has all the subtlety of a brick through a window." Mike pushed his reading glasses up his nose, eyes razor sharp, scanning $78,000 in suspicious transactions. Paper trail cleaner than my grandmother's kitchen. Documented harassment pattern. Prosecutors dream of cases this easy. Meanwhile, Linda was constructing her signature color-coded timeline on poster board, mapping months of harassment against real estate sales with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years teaching teenagers algebra. "Look at this beautiful pattern," she said. "Target vulnerable families, escalate violations for months, then magically produce investor buyers when they break." Carlos leaned in, nodding. Every loophole, every HOA technicality, every manipulated violation, he already knew how to weaponize them in our favor. Carlos leaned back in his folding chair, letting out a whistle loud enough to summon every dog in 3 blocks. "And she's using HOA money to pay divorce lawyers? That's not criminal genius, that's criminal stupid." Our battle plan emerged over 2 hours of increasingly caffeinated strategy sessions. Operation Documentation Fortress. Carlos volunteered to turn the neighborhood into Fort Knox, complete with security cameras, motion sensors, night vision, and cloud backups. If Brenda so much as glanced sideways at a mailbox, it would be recorded in courtroom-quality 4K. Linda shifted into full teacher mode, producing standardized incident report forms with the precision of someone designing a final exam. Dates, times, witnesses, photographs, police report numbers. "We're building a case file so airtight it could survive a nuclear blast," she announced. Sarah practically rubbed her hands together in forensic accounting glee. "I'm calling colleagues who owe me favors. We'll produce an independent audit that meets federal court standards. Operation Legal Annihilation." Mike dove into HOA corporate governance like it was his favorite hobby, which apparently it was. Board members have fiduciary duties under state law. Every fraudulent transaction creates
personal liability. She's not just stealing, she's dismantling her own legal protection. The annual board elections lined up perfectly. Tom, Sarah, and Mike would run for the 3 open seats, flipping control from Brenda's rubber stamp committee to our Justice Coalition. Criminal complaint gets filed Tuesday, Mike continued, organizing police reports with the satisfaction of someone completing a crossword puzzle. Embezzlement, harassment, false police reports. A full felony buffet. Linda grinned. Operation Public Humiliation is ready to launch. Linda's teaching background made her our propaganda minister. Do or Die information campaign, professional flyers outlining Brenda's thefts, coordinated social media exposure. We were going to make Brenda's crimes the talk of every suburban dinner table. The financial fallout was staggering. $78,000 stolen from 40 households meant each family had effectively been overcharged nearly $2,000. When soccer moms discover their HOA president is pilfering their wallets, revolutions happen fast. Carlos suggested a media angle that would make journalists salivate. HOA president steals money and racially harasses neighbors. Channel 7 would break regular programming for this gold mine. Our psychological warfare was beautifully simple. Let Brenda think she was winning while we quietly built a legal cage around her. I would maintain normal routines, appear blissfully oblivious, and allow her desperation to generate more prosecutable evidence. Classic rope-a-dope, me explained, his grin reflecting decades of courtroom carnage. Let her exhaust herself throwing wild punches while we documented every missed swing. The timeline convergence was perfect. Foreclosure hearing in 3 weeks, audit results in 2, board elections in 4. Multiple disasters converging like a choreographed demolition. Sarah had already contacted Channel 7's investigative pitbull, Janet Mills, a reporter with an Emmy collection built on exposing suburban corruption. HOA fraud stories were catnip for her. She practically drooled at the thought of Brenda's unraveling. Then Mike discovered the final nail in Brenda's professional coffin. Her real estate license renewal in 6 weeks required criminal background disclosure. Fraud convictions? Automatic permanent revocation. Complete career obliteration, he said, his voice calm but deadly. With the warm satisfaction of someone describing a perfect sunset, Mike summed it up. Financial ruin plus professional destruction equals total annihilation. As our suburban war council dispersed, Tom clapped a hand on my shoulder. 2 months ago, you were the quiet mechanic who minded his own business. Now you're leading a neighborhood revolution. I surveyed the walls plastered with evidence, battle plans, and coalition schedules. From isolated target to resistance commander, it felt surreal, like discovering you could fly. Sometimes bullies pick the wrong victim, I said. Brenda's about to learn that lesson the hard way. The trap was set, loaded, and perfectly positioned. Now we waited for our cornered predator to spring her own downfall. Monday morning arrived with the sweet sound of panic, Brenda's voice echoing across the cul-de-sac like a fire alarm having a nervous breakdown. She paced her driveway at 7 a.m., phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at anyone unfortunate enough to meet her gaze. I need an emergency board meeting tonight. Something's happening and I need legal protection. Through my kitchen window, I watched her struggle to rally what little support remained. Clara shuffled over reluctantly, looking like she'd rather be getting a root canal. Janet followed minutes later, doubt creeping into her posture like frost on a window pane. By noon, the emergency assessment notices appeared in every mailbox, $500 per household for immediate legal defense against outside interference. Agitators attempting to destabilize community governance, the letter screamed. Brenda demanded immediate payment from every household to hire attorneys, claiming I was threatening to sue the entire HOA. What she didn't know, Tom had been secretly parked outside her 3-person emergency meeting with a digital recorder that captured every frantic word.
They're investigating our finances, Brenda's voice crackled through the speaker when Tom played it back later. I don't know how much they know, but we need to control the narrative before this gets out of hand. Clara's meek reply barely made it through. Brenda, maybe we should just— No, Brenda snapped. I've worked too hard building this community to let them destroy everything. If I have to leave town, fine, but I'm not going down alone. The audio was courtroom ready, and Mike's grin upon hearing it could have powered every streetlight in Willowbrook. Wednesday night delivered Brenda's first act of real desperation, vandalism laced with incompetence. Security cameras caught her prowling my property at 2:47 a.m.
Dressed like a suburban ninja, black yoga pants, dark hoodie, fooled absolutely no one. She lugged a toolkit of petty revenge, tire-slashing knife, spray paint, and small containers of motor oil, all staged behind my garage in a laughably obvious attempt to fabricate environmental violations. The best part? She spent 15 minutes positioning her fake evidence directly under my motion-activated floodlight, providing crystal-clear footage of her face, her BMW license plate, and— Her feeble attempt at frame-up artistry ended spectacularly on Thursday morning. The code enforcement inspector found the planted oil containers immediately. They still had Home Depot price stickers clinging to them. When he calmly explained that fresh motor oil doesn't constitute an environmental violation, Brenda's story crumbled faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. "Ma'am, filing false environmental reports is a federal offense," the inspector said, irritation barely concealed. "I'm documenting this incident and forwarding it to our fraud investigation unit." By that afternoon, Brenda's social media meltdown had ignited, burning through the weekend like a digital dumpster fire nobody could look away from. The Willowbrook Neighborhood Watch Facebook group became her personal therapy platform, filled with increasingly unhinged rants about outside agitators and imaginary threats to property values. Her 2 a.m. post on Friday was a self-incrimination masterpiece. Some people don't understand that communities have standards. When certain elements move in and start changing the character of established neighborhoods, decent people have to take action to protect their investments. Screenshot saved. Forwarded to our legal team. By Saturday, the fallout had only begun. The bribery attempt that truly sealed her fate came Sunday morning. Carlos was busy installing cameras at Linda's house when Brenda approached with all the subtlety of a desperate used car salesman on the last day of the month. "I know Marcus is paying you people to lie about me," she barked, pulling an envelope thick enough to choke a horse. $2,000 cash if they ignored the cameras and stopped assisting with the harassment campaign. Carlos, bless his contractor's soul, kept installing cameras while recording the entire exchange on his phone. "Ma'am, I'm just helping neighbors protect their property. Maybe you should talk to a lawyer." "I don't need lawyers. I need this neighborhood back under control." Her voice pitched higher than a smoke detector. "That man has turned everyone against me with his lies and manipulation." The desperation was so tangible you could spread it on toast. Brenda was unraveling in real time, each frantic move generating more evidence for our growing prosecution file. Sunday evening brought the nuclear option, another false police report, this one claiming I'd threatened her with a weapon during a driveway confrontation that never happened. The responding officers found me in my garage, covered in grease, working on a neighbor's transmission with 3 witnesses present. Officer Morgan's patience had officially evaporated. "Ma'am, this is your 4th false report in 2 weeks. You're looking at charges," Officer Morgan barked. Monday brought the preliminary audit results via Sarah's encrypted email, and the numbers were worse than anyone imagined. Brenda hadn't just stolen $78,000, she'd been systematically overcharging every household for phantom services while pocketing the excess. Total theft, approximately $96,000 over 30 months. Our neighborhood dictator wasn't just broke and desperate, she was a career criminal whose time and victims had finally run out.
The endgame accelerated faster than we could have dreamed, and Brenda was doing all the work for us. Tuesday night's break-in was a criminal masterpiece worthy of a Three Stooges reboot. At 2:33 a.m., while normal people dreamed of vacations and lottery wins, Brenda was living her best burglar fantasy at the HOA management office. The security footage looked like a rejected heist movie written by someone who'd never committed a crime. Our suburban Napoleon fumbled a stolen master key with all the subtlety of a rhinoceros in tap shoes, frantically feeding documents into an industrial shredder as if she were crafting the world's most expensive confetti. The silent alarm triggered faster than Brenda's common sense had ever appeared, and Officer Rodriguez arrived to find her elbow-deep in shredded evidence, surrounded by a snowstorm of what had been financial records. "Ma'am, step away from the computer and put your hands where I can see them," Rodriguez commanded, likely questioning how his Tuesday night shift had devolved into amateur hour at the crime academy. Brenda's response was pure daytime TV gold. "You don't understand. They're destroying everything I've built. This community was perfect before they came."
The smell of overheated electronics and desperation filled the office as she was cuffed and read her rights. Watching the footage later, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Until I remembered the fake. The police documented the full slashing incident. Bail was fixed at $25,000, which for Brenda may as well have been $25 million, given her finances looked like the Titanic after striking the iceberg. She spent 3 days in the county jail, likely the first time in adulthood she'd been somewhere without a manager to berate. While our dethroned tyrant sampled state hospitality, Clara made a choice that sealed Brenda's destiny forever. She went to the jail with a digital recorder tucked inside her purse. What she captured was prosecutorial gold. "I need your help, Clara." Brenda's shaky voice came through the phone speaker when Clara replayed it for our group. The desperation was so sharp it was almost edible. "There's cash in my garage, behind the water heater. We can both run before this gets worse." Clara's hesitant reply barely registered. "Brenda, I can't." $50,000. Help me and we'll vanish somewhere new. They don't know us." Mike gave a long whistle after hearing the audio. Proof of theft, conspiracy, intent to flee, and obstruction of justice. She confessed to everything while still behind bars. It was as if she aimed to set records for criminal foolishness. By Thursday night, the urgent neighborhood meeting filled the community center beyond capacity. The room buzzed with righteous anger and the unmistakable stench of community center coffee strong enough to peel paint. 33 households attended, and the shared resolve was unmistakable. The fury in the room could have lit up Las Vegas for a week. Tom laid out Sarah's final audit with the pride of a gambler showing a royal flush. The figures were jaw-dropping. Brenda hadn't merely pocketed $78,000. She had built a criminal operation involving fake vendor payouts, padded service contracts, and kickback deals totaling $112,000 over 3 years. "Every single household here has been systematically stolen from," Tom declared, sparking gasps and bursts of profanity colorful enough to shame sailors. "That's an average of $2,800 taken from each family." The no-confidence vote passed unanimously, except for Janet, who abstained while wearing the look of someone eager to tunnel straight to Canada. 33 households demanded Brenda's immediate ousting, criminal charges, and repayment with interest. By Friday morning, the media circus Brenda had always craved arrived, though not in the leading role she envisioned. Channel 7's van parked at dawn, quickly followed by rival stations drawn to this suburban scandal jackpot. Reporter Janet Mills dove into neighbor interviews with the excitement of someone sniffing Emmy potential. That evening, the news opened with HOA president arrested in major embezzlement case, featuring Brenda's mugshot and security footage of her shredding spree.
My interview took every drop of diplomatic skill my divorce had taught me. This isn't about vengeance, I told the camera carefully. It's about demanding accountability from people who misuse power. The piece exploded online, spreading faster than gossip at a school reunion. The hashtag HOA Horror trended nationwide within hours, with thousands posting their own nightmare tales and cheering our David versus Goliath triumph. Brenda's real estate career collapsed spectacularly. Her brokerage froze her license instantly. Former clients surfaced with shady transaction complaints, and her reputation became more poisonous than radioactive waste. The foreclosure auction unfolded quietly, her home selling for $280,000. The house sold for $70,000 under market value, since active investigations and swarms of news vans tend to scare away bidders. By 3 a.m. Saturday, Brenda delivered her final act of self-destruction, a Facebook confession video. Crying into her phone with mascara streaking like messy abstract art, she blamed everyone but herself for the fallout of her crimes. "I was only trying to protect our neighborhood," she sobbed. "Sometimes good people must make hard choices." The comments turned into a digital firing squad as neighbors unloaded years of pent-up grievances. The video vanished in hours, but screenshots are forever. The suburban tyrant's reign was finished. The sentencing on a crisp Thursday morning felt like the finale of the most gratifying reality series ever produced. The courthouse lot looked like a neighborhood block party reunion, with over 40 residents carpooling as if heading to a championship game. Inside, Judge Patricia Hernandez's courtroom overflowed with people, every bench packed with faces I'd come to see as comrades over the past 3 months. The air buzzed with nervous anticipation and the bitter scent of courthouse coffee, the shared energy of people who had waited far too long for justice. Brenda sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit that clashed
horribly with her artificial blonde highlights, looking like a wilted balloon animal beside her exhausted public defender. The woman who once bullied our streets with clipboard power now looked like a scarecrow that had survived a tornado. Channel 7's cameras angled for maximum spectacle, while Janet Mills had claimed a front-row seat to what she was already calling the HOA story of the decade. When Judge Hernandez invited victim impact statements, when the judge called for statements, I rose first, my heart pounding against my chest like it wanted out. Just 3 months earlier, I'd been a quiet mechanic who minded his own business. Now I stood as the voice of an entire neighborhood. Your Honor, this case began with a woman dialing 911 because I opened my own garage door, I said, my voice steadier than I'd imagined. But it was never about a vehicle. It was about control, power, and what happens when someone believes they can bully their neighbors without consequence. I recounted the growing harassment, the bogus police calls, and the calculated theft that drained thousands from every household. But mostly, I spoke about fear, the way Brenda twisted authority into a weapon, making people feel unsafe in their own homes. She didn't only take our money, I said, locking eyes on her, though she wouldn't meet mine. She robbed us of peace of mind, of community spirit, of the trust that neighbors protect each other instead of preying on each other. Tom followed, his postal worker's voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed both the darkness and the resilience of human nature. Sarah laid out the financial evidence with surgical precision. Linda spoke of the lessons their children absorbed watching their community fight back against corruption. When it came time for Brenda's side, her lawyer delivered a performance fit for amateur theater. Tales of mental health battles, divorce scars, financial hardship, every possible excuse except the one that mattered, owning up to her crimes. "My client sincerely regrets her actions," the public defender begged. "She is prepared to repay the losses in full and attend counseling." Brenda finally rose to speak, and what followed was pure audacity drenched in crocodile tears. "I never intended to harm anyone," she cried, blotting her eyes with tissues working harder than a NASCAR pit crew.
This neighborhood was everything to me. I only wanted to uphold standards and safeguard property values. Sometimes people don't realize that leadership requires tough choices. The collective eye roll in the courtroom was nearly loud enough to echo. Even her own lawyer seemed ready to disappear under the defense table. Judge Hernandez had heard enough to last a lifetime. "Miss Wilson," she began, her tone as sharp as steel. "In 3 decades on this bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated abuse of fiduciary duty combined with racial harassment and criminal intimidation." She paused, eyeing Brenda as though inspecting a strange but revolting insect. "You were entrusted with authority and used it to rob the very people who elected you. You singled out a minority homeowner with false police calls that could have ended in tragedy. You destroyed evidence, tried to evade the court, and even now refuse to take responsibility." The judge's words carried the finality of unquestioned power. "This court sentences you to 4 years in state prison, repayment of $112,000 plus court fees, and 5 years of supervised probation upon release." The gavel slammed like thunder, and the courtroom burst into applause Judge Hernandez didn't bother to silence. 40 households finding justice doesn't sound like ordinary clapping. It's deeper, richer, like the universe snapping back into balance. As Brenda was escorted away in chains, she finally glanced at our side of the room. Her face carried no regret, no apology, only a sharp, burning hatred for those bold enough to hold her accountable. On the courthouse steps, with cameras flashing and neighbors cheering, a reporter pushed a microphone toward me. "Mr. Rodriguez, what advice would you give other homeowners facing HOA abuse?" I paused, thinking of the fear, the endless paperwork, the coalition meetings, the long months that brought us here. "Document everything. Build community. Truth wins," I said, the weight of 3 months of struggle and triumph packed into those 6 words. Within hours, the line went viral, rallying HOA reform movements across the country. But in that moment, standing in the sun, surrounded by neighbors who had become like family through hardship, I understood something deeper. We hadn't simply beaten a bully. We had proven what ordinary people can achieve when they stand together. The American dream wasn't just about personal success. It was about neighbors watching out for each other, about justice being shared equally, about regular people rising to greatness when circumstances demanded it. 6 months after Brenda's